Hello, everyone. Thank you for being a part of the Love Like Crazy podcast today. We've actually done something a little bit different today. We just want to be candid today and really open and honest with you. And so we've kind of changed things up. You guys see us oftentimes interview other people and hear their side of the story, their conversation. And so today I was able to sit down with our producer, Carlos Flores from Hi Hello Labs. And Carlos asked me some questions. He interviewed me. You're going to see Stacey in another episode as he interviews her and asks her different questions. And we just shared our heart. We were just open and honest about these different questions that he asked. And it was pretty refreshing. It was a lot of fun to be able to do that. And before we get into this interview, I want to thank you guys for being a part of this podcast. The response that you've given us has been wonderful. And so I would encourage you to continue. If you are enjoying this, to hit that little like button. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, because what that does, it alerts you to upcoming episodes and things that can build your marriage and your family in a stronger way. So thank you for helping us to push this podcast forward. It's been so much fun watching all the things that the Lord has done. So let's jump into this interview together.
Hello, Jay.
Hey, Carlos.
Thank you for allowing me to sit down and ask a few questions. I know it's pretty weird because I'm on the other side of the other side.
It's a different type of episode of Love Like Crazy. And
Yes.
usually you're behind the scenes and it's like people hear us reference Carlos, but to have you here sitting with me, you and Caroline have been a guest on the podcast before, but this is different and I'm glad we're doing this.
As we've gone through quite a few years now with the pod, there's been a lot of questions and a lot of trying to understand more who Jay and Stacey are as not just pastors, but a marriage, a couple, parents, now grandparents. So what would you say as a man is one of the things that has really challenged you to be able to balance out marriage, being a grandparent, being a parent, but also being the head of a pretty successful church?
Well, I think that learning to manage your time appropriately, it's kind of one of the things that I have the tendency of pouring myself into ministry 100% of, because you've in past episodes, you've heard my wife talk about her dad was a workaholic. I have the tendency, because of the work ethic that was instilled in me by my dad, I love to give of myself 100% to a project, to build the church. And I know it's all for the Lord. We're building this thing for him. It's not for Jay's glory. It's for the Lord's glory. But to strike a balance that is healthy, to where I am making sure that I'm doing the responsibilities of what God has called me to, but I'm also I'm pouring time into my marriage. I'm building my wife. I'm building my kids, my family, and now my grandkids. And I realize now, as I've gotten a little bit older, I'm better at balancing that. Whenever I was young, it was nothing to work, 40, 60, 80 hours. I know people hear that like what, work in ministry that long of a period of time. But when we were under construction, we went through a year-long period of, I didn't take any days off and would work Monday through Friday as the general contractor on the project from 6 a.m. till 6 in the evening. Then Saturday was sermon prep day. We were meeting in a school, had to go, set up the church. Sunday you preach, and there were some counseling sessions on Sundays as well. Then Monday right back at it. So 7 days a week. I remember I took Christmas Day off, I think Christmas Eve as well. But we were steady back on it. We didn't take a vacation or anything. And it was one of those seasons in life that we recognized was really, really hard, really difficult. But I was doing this for the Lord, pouring myself into it. But I came to the place where I realized that ain't healthy. That is not healthy for me or my wife or my kids. And what good does it do to build this church for the Lord if you flame out, or, you pay the price with your mental health?
Did you realize it wasn't healthy because something happened, or did you just, it clicked one day?
Well, I had a little health scare. It was probably about a month before we launched the church. I had gone to a pastor's breakfast, and there's a group of us progressive pastors. We get together monthly. There's usually anywhere from 8 to 12 of us that gather. And it's a great, I look forward to it every month. And that day in particular, it was at a church called Victory Harvest over on Flannery Drive, which was only about probably 5 miles from where our church is. And as we're leaving out of that breakfast, all of a sudden I get hit with a dizzy spell, and I make it to my truck. And I've never had vertigo. I've had vertigo before, but not like that. And I'm like, well, I'll be okay. Well, I pull out on the highway and I can't drive. I'm about to pass out. And I pull into this parking lot of this business that's next to the church. And I start thinking, am I having a stroke? What's going on? And I stagger. I literally fall through the door of that business, freak everybody out, the receptionist, and they want, do we need to call an ambulance? I'm not, no, just call my wife. And just so happens there was a guy working there who came to the church. And he volunteered. He said, I'll take you to the church. So he drove me to the church. We wind up going to the doctor's office. They did EKGs. They ran all these different tests, and it was nothing other than my blood pressure. They had put me on blood pressure meds during the construction of the church, but my blood pressure went sky high, and it caused that episode. And so the doctor told me, he said, they adjusted my medication, but that little scare kind of made me realize, like, you know what, this is not worth, I'll give my life for the cause of Christ, but I'm not going to work myself into a grave because my family and my wife, they need me here, and the church needs me here as well. So that kind of taught me, and there's the ebb and flow that we go through seasons. Stacey and I, we communicate about this. Hey, we're going into a season of ministry now. It's extremely busy. So we know we're going to pour everything into this. We're going to work hard, but then when their season comes to rest, we're going to rest well.
A lot of people don't know this, but you have multiple jobs. You're not just a pastor. I think when it comes to pastors, everyone thinks like, oh, they need to be there 24/7. Helping out, doing this, doing that. When you're called to do this or a funeral or a wedding, you have to be there. And sometimes, how do you split yourself up to so many needs?
I hate to tell people no. When they're going through that time of grieving and hurting, I want to be able to be there for them. So that's been a difficult one for me, to be able to have to look at something and say, well, I'm going to be out of town on this time. Or, when you're dealing with budgeting, or you're dealing with things that just pop up, or hospital visits. The greatest thing for me has been able to, over the years, we've been able to build a good team, and we've had different staff members that we've been able to hire. And at first I was kind of like, well, I got this, I can handle this. And I would not release things to them. But over the course of time, and honestly, as I've matured and grown up a little bit, I realized that maybe my way is not the best way. And maybe this person can handle this a little bit better than me, or their personality is a little bit better matched for this. And so I've allowed these different individuals to step in and help with ministry, and I've learned the value of handing things off.
Right.
I think a lot of times we talk about delegating things off to other people, and I kind of looked at that, unfortunately, as a way like I'm pushing my responsibilities off on other people. But you get a lot more accomplished when you work together as a team. And it's not necessarily pushing my responsibilities off on other people. It's allowing them to participate and be a part of what God's called all of us to do.
Totally makes sense. Now, as you exercise your leadership at church, you exercise your leadership at home, can you pinpoint any sort of situation where you're like, man, I remember this happened and I had to say no, and it hurt me to say no, but it had to be done? Whether it was a game for one of the boys, or whether it was disappointing a church member.
Well, I know one of the things that we had pop up was the boys played sports in high school. That was back in the season when we were doing Wednesday night services, and Stacey and I would always make sure that, like, when Tyler played, he was playing football, and he had games on Wednesday nights. I was teaching on Wednesday nights, and at that point, we really didn't have a very large staff. We didn't really have ones who could accommodate a service. And so, but what we made sure that we would do is either I would teach or Stacey would teach, but one of us was always at his game.
Yeah.
And because we wanted him to see us in the stands. We didn't travel much with them, but if there were home games, one of us was always in the stands. I know for me, there was something that popped up that was very, very personal. It was the second Easter. I think it was the second Easter that we had launched as a church. It might have been the first Easter. And I had a very, very close friend that suddenly passed away. We had an entire week lined up of serving in the community. We used to do what we called the Great Egg Hunt, 100,000 candy stuffed Easter eggs. We'd actually expanded that to 2 locations. I mean, it was just a massive undertaking. We would have anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 people show up for this Easter egg hunt. So it was a massive ordeal. And on top of that, leading up to that, we would do serve projects, feeding the school faculty at all these different schools in the community, picking up trash out of the ditches, just serve projects in the community. Well, my friend passed away. If memory serves me correctly, it was a Sunday night. I get the call at 11 o'clock at night, jump in my vehicle, drive an hour and 15 minutes to Lafayette, and I'm there with his wife and family, and then get back in my vehicle, made it back to Baton Rouge about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I remember just sitting in my office, closing it. I didn't want anybody coming in, but I could hear there were people showing up already because they were getting ready to start cooking, prepping for all these serve projects. And I didn't really want to talk to anybody. Didn't really want to be around anybody. And just sitting in my office and sobbing because I had lost such a close friend. And the cool part was those were all projects that I had to say yes to that week. I have to be there. I've got to serve. I've got to do all these things. But our serve team, the cooking team, all these different ones that were involved in this, they were the ones who stepped up and they said, you know what? You don't need, we got this. We got this. And because of the culture that we had built, because of ones with such a heart to serve, my wife and I were able to take a step back and attend to the funeral services that week, go be with the family that week, grieve because all of our boys had lost one that they felt like, was like a grandpa to them. And it was because it was one of the things that I probably, that pressing on me of you've got to do this, you've got to be there and do all these projects, but really like, hey, I've got something that's even more important to attend to this week. And because of the team that we had in place, it allowed us to step back and really, really be there and grieve as a family. And so that really meant a lot, I don't know if that's answering your question or not.
Because it's personal. It's something
it was something very, very personal. Mm-hmm. That was a week the church took care of us, really took care of us. They saw what we were walking through. And instead of, hey, pastor needs to do this and be here for that, we really saw the church in action stepping up and taking care of us.
Well, isn't it amazing that you reap what you've sown?
Yeah. It's, a lot of times as people, it's hard to receive. So I'm the one who's always helping. I'm the one who's always doing, and to be in that position of having to receive, that was a hard pill to swallow. Mm-hmm. But
I know you mentioned this before as well with the flood and your house, where a lot of church members got together and actually helped out.
Yeah. That was probably one of the most helpless feelings you ever had, because you just kind of look around at all the devastation in the area. It's not just my home. It's all my neighbors, probably 75% of the church walking through the same thing, the community walking through the same thing. And there was almost this feeling of just not just helplessness, but hopelessness. And there's so much to do. And people just showed up.
Yeah.
They just showed up, and we didn't have to tell them. They just did.
I think, just speaking to men in general and leaders and entrepreneurs, you can't force people to do something they don't want to do, but when they do something out of their heart and the abundance of their joy to do it, that's when you're like, okay, I'm leading the right way.
Yeah.
What advice would you give men, businessmen, leaders out there that are starting out fresh, new? You've been in, let's call it in leadership for what now? 20 plus? 30?
30 years.
30 years. What advice would you give us new leaders on trying to build a good team?
I know for us, we were so excited whenever we were able to start, and I'm going to talk about paid staff, when we were able to start hiring people to help in the process. But I think a lot of times you're so excited to start hiring people, you don't realize that brings in a whole new set of challenges in it with itself, because now you're responsible for these individuals that you are paying a salary to. You're responsible for not just them, but their families as well. And there are challenges because you're dealing with personalities, you're dealing with different individuals with different opinions and ideas. And I said this a few minutes ago, sometimes because my mindset was my way is the right way. This is how we're going to do it. And leadership has taught me this way. My way is not necessarily always the best way. When you have people who are qualified leaders stepping into positions and wanting to help move the baton down the field, a lot of times the ideas that they have might be even better than the ones that you have. And it's learning to operate as a team. So I've come to the place where I value the opinions of my team members. They realize that, hey, we may not do this. Pastor Jay may not take my idea and run with it. But I want to hear all their voices. They've all got a voice. They're all valuable in the process. And so now we sit around, and we've been doing this for years. We sit around when something's coming up, and we're going to have our team meetings, and we're going to discuss things. And I want to know, what's your opinion? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I'm taking mental notes, because some of those things, we may utilize. Some of them we may not utilize. So I would tell leaders to the ones that are on your team, value them as people, value their opinion, and don't just see them as an employee. Don't just see them as somebody that's a workhorse in your organization, but, build into that place where you're family, and really learn to value that employee's, that person's, that teammate's opinion, because they bring value to the table.
Now, obviously, your podcast is about marriage, building legacy, family. You have 3 amazing sons.
I do. And 3 amazing daughter-in-laws.
And 3 amazing daughter-in-laws.
And 6 amazing grandchildren.
What pressure would you say you've been on, if any, to leave a legacy worth living?
I think every pastor, and I don't know if this translates over into the business world or not. I think that if I had a business, I would want my sons to take over the business and help it thrive and go to another level. I can't really think of another pastor that does not, maybe think along that same vein, that I'd like to lead this church. I'd love to see my sons step into the place where they're leading and pastoring, and eventually they become, the next generation takes it, and my sons roll with it. I came to grips with this many years ago. My sons may not be called to ministry. And I remember seeing the statistic that 80% of men hate their jobs. And I love what I do. There are hard days. There are days that are stressful, but by and large, I love what I do. I love interacting with our church congregation. I love interacting with the community. I love being able to speak the vision and direction that the Lord has for our church and for their lives on Sunday mornings as I preach and teach. But I didn't want my sons doing something just because Dad wanted them to. I wanted them to be the best welder, teacher, garbage man that God has called them to be, if they really feel that is what He has called them to do. I wanted them to love what they do. So, consequently, I wound up with one son who is in ministry. He's our worship pastor, but he has a business on the side. I have another son who works in a plant. I have another son who has his own business. And the legacy that I wanted to really impress in them is, I had a lot of opportunities and a lot of options in front of me whenever I stepped into marrying my wife, and what am I going to do with my life? There were a lot of opportunities there. God blessed me with a lot of tremendous opportunities. But every one of those that I stepped into, I really wasn't happy. I wanted to be, and I was not happy until I was able to step into the calling that God had for my life. So the legacy that I wanted to leave behind for my sons was, God has a calling for you, no matter what it is, whether it's ministry or whether it's running a business. step into that calling and be a man of God that he uses in that calling to make a difference in this world around you. And it's not just them. I'd like to see that one of these days for my grandkids as well.
Do you have any regrets?
The only regret that I have is I had a momentary thought years ago, whenever Bitcoin was first popping on the scene. I would just make these little random investments, like $100 here, there, whatever. And it was probably, I don't know, 2012, 2013. I had a thought like, I'd drop $100 on that Bitcoin thing. And I don't know, I don't remember what it was, maybe 8 cents, 10 cents a coin at that point. That's a regret because everybody sees where it is now, but that's a silly regret. But I often think back to that like, man, that would have been awesome. But there are some things with the boys that I wish I had done differently. I did a really good job of teaching my boys to pray. Prayer is crucial and pivotal in your walk with the Lord. So I feel like I did a good job of teaching them to pray. I feel like I did a good job of teaching them the importance of being involved, invested, and committed within the local church. If I could go back and do things a little bit different with my boys, I probably would have done a better job of really discipling them in the direction of, spending time with them and sitting them down and teaching them the importance of daily devotion. I did those things myself, but I didn't necessarily sit them down and walk. We would have family time where we would do, praise and worship, or we'd devotion. We had a lot of time as a family where we prayed together. But that's kind of one thing. If I could go back, I probably would have been more intentional on walking them through the process of discipleship a little bit better.
Last question.
Okay.
As your producer, I know one of your biggest audiences is your church body.
Yep.
If you could tell them something in a few sentences, what would you tell them? Which I'm sure they'll listen.
Yeah, there's a lot that I would tell them. First of all, I know it's a lot to go to a church and to invest your life into that community of believers. That's a big step. That's a big commitment. And man, we've been blessed. We launched the church and community 2008, and it's just been a rocket ride ever since. I mean, the Lord has done some really amazing things. And I first of all, I'd just tell our church family, thank you so much for trusting in Stacey and I as your pastors. Thank you for the way that I know everybody always looks at, they hear me speak on Sundays. They hear Stacey speak on Sundays. But our church has just done a really good job of serving not just us, but one another, serving the community. And we've just really been blessed to be a part of that, to step back. It's been a tremendous blessing of watching different church family step into the giftings. They see those giftings that God has for them, and then they step out and begin to use those giftings. And it's just been really a cool thing to see that, to see them embrace purpose. I know that's a catchword these days. Rick Warren, probably launched that years ago, the purpose-driven life. And ever since then, purpose. God has a purpose. God has a plan. It's a real big catch thing that people run with. But I really mean that whenever I see people in our church, it's like their eyes, they get born again. And then boom, they realize God has a purpose for me and these giftings he's placed in my life. And they get really excited about serving or sharing the gospel, or they get fired up about, engaging with the Lord in prayer. And it's just been really a neat thing to be a part of that process, to see God use our church family in that way. So I would just say thank you for having an open heart to the Lord and being able to be led by the Lord. That's just a blessing to me as pastor, because what's the point? I mean, if you just have church and have a bunch of people show up and nobody's growing and nobody's getting born again and nobody's serving and nobody's, loving, what's the point? That's not what God has called us to. But to really see a church thrive and move in the direction of what you read about in the book of Acts, that's what blesses me. That's what blesses me and Stacey both.
Jay, thank you so much for sitting with us.
Carlos, thank you.
And answering
Appreciate
a few
you.
questions.
And appreciate you for letting me be honest today and just share my thoughts. Thank you for listening to this interview, and I hope that our genuineness has been a blessing to you as we answer these different questions that Carlos asked as he talked about family, talked about marriage, and talked about ministry. Because a lot of people are curious, they want to know. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you share, leave us a comment, give us a review, and until next time, I'm Jay, and this is Love Like Crazy.